Fort Bliss, 2088. Every military grunt has their moments of brilliance. And by brilliance, I mean blinding, neon stupidity.
Innoxiation.
Something about combat arms makes dumb decisions seep into your cybernetic veins. It's practically a rite of passage. You stay out too late, down enough synth alcohol to light up your neural net, and then try to survive PT at dawn. Civilian jobs? Sure, you might slog through a corporate cubicle or teach a swarm of bratty kids while running on fumes. But in the military, stupidity gets turbocharged. It was my first real night out after advanced individual training AIT. I'd just been assigned to Alpha Battery, 560 seconds anti-drone artillery. The unit was stationed at Fort Bliss. Yes, still standing after all these years, with its endless stretches of dust and a vibe that's less bliss and more endurance test. My new roommate, Johnny, decided to initiate me properly. Juarez was off limits on a weeknight, commands orders, so we stumbled to the base's old bowling alley. Think dim neon lighting, retro synth tracks playing overhead, and enough cheap booze to short-circuit a mech. Walking there? Classic E1 move. No self-respecting private with a monthly credit chip worth less than a drone part could afford a grab car. Besides, when you're young and augmented, walking a few miles seems like an adventure, or more likely a necessity. Every credit spared on transportation went straight into the party fund. Priorities, right? That night was a glorious, blurry mess. 18 years old, no tolerance, and months of sobriety thanks to basic training. 5 or 6 beers later, yes, the cheap, synthy kind, I was hammered. By the time I staggered back to the barracks, the world was spinning, my HUD was glitching, and my cyber-enhanced liver was working overtime. Morning came fast. PT formation at 0530. My body was screaming betrayal as I dragged myself into line. FNG, that's freaking new guy in military slang. I couldn't screw this up. Warm-ups were hell. Jumping jacks, burpees, push-ups, my cybernetic limbs felt like lead. Riggs, the unit's resident holy roller, kept throwing me pitying glances. He was probably praying for my liver. Then came the run. 2 miles through the Fort Bliss wasteland. Easy on paper, but when you're barely sober and your internal stabilizers are fried, torture. The route conveniently passed the bowling alley from the night before. As we jogged by, my stomach lurched. First came the queasiness, then the cold sweat. By the halfway mark, I was choking back the inevitable. Keep moving, rookie, barked the guy behind me. He gave me a not-so-gentle shove, keeping me from breaking formation. I gutted it out one agonizing step at a time. By the time we hit the finish line, I was swaying like a drone in a hurricane. Johnny had to prop me up while the sergeant barked out the day's orders. Then came the inevitable. As soon as we were dismissed, I doubled over and let it all out, right into the gutter. Check out the FNG, someone muttered, their voice dripping with amusement. I didn't look up. My face was too busy acquainting itself with the pavement. Lesson learned? Hardly. Like I said, stupidity is practically built into the system. After Johnny propped me up and got me into my rack, I managed to steal a glorious 30 minutes of recharge before he shook me awake. Come on, rookie. Shower up, hit the mess, and let's get moving. Johnny, being the seasoned party cyborg had seen this kind of self-inflicted damage 100 times before. He wasn't harsh about it. Maybe he saw some potential in me, or maybe he just enjoyed the show. The morning was a full-blown sensory assault. Hungover and slogging through the neon-baked streets of the motor pool under the relentless desert sun, I felt every screw and bolt of my neural processor straining. Thankfully, we had aircraft recognition drills after lunch, and by then, I'd rebooted enough to function. That night, you guessed it, back at the alley. Turns out the human operating system is surprisingly resilient, but only if you're young, dumb, and running on pure instinct. The worst hangover ever, DMZ edition. Korea was a different level of hell. I'd written some encrypted notes about this before, but the memory still stings. My buddy Andy was rotating out, leaving the DMZ and A5/5 ADA. The stars, or misaligned planets, granted me a 3-day weekend, coinciding perfectly with Andy's final days before clearing division and heading home as a civilian. I'd just come off 12-hour shift in a perimeter guard shack. Barely had time to crash for an hour when the door to my pod rattled like an alarm set to annoying. Standing there was Andy, all 5'0" of wiry chaos, sporting his trademark mustache and an evil grin. "Get dressed, asshole. We're going drinking." I groaned, half tempted to slam the door and pretend I was dead. "Andy, I just got off duty, ate, showered, and I'm practically offline. I need recharge time." But Andy wasn't having it. "Screw that, you coward. The bars are open. I've got 3 days left in this dump, and we're burning all of them. Let's go." By the end of the first 24-hour cycle, I realized Andy wasn't joking. It was 3 days of drinking formaldehyde spiked liquor. No, that's not a glitch. Actual poison. Hard sin spirits from the Class 6, and throwing back cheap shots in hole-in-the-wall joints. There were bar girls with augmented smiles, street food carts with questionable hygiene, and so much chaos my memory banks must have fried, because I remember almost none of it. The day Andy finally left, I dragged myself out to formation, still heavily under the influence. I spotted him strolling toward the front gate, polished in his class as bags slung over his shoulder. He glanced back, smirked, and flipped me off. Classic Andy. The morning after. Calling me hungover that morning would have been generous. I was practically pickled, stumbling into formation like a malfunctioning bot. The formaldehyde still coursing through my veins wasn't helping either. Warm-up drills were a disaster. I puked after the sit-ups, the jumping jacks, and nearly during the count-off. My team leader, section chief, and platoon sergeant? Oh, they noticed. The trio took turns tearing into me like they were optimizing a broken unit for scrap. Somehow, despite all logic and the laws of human endurance, I made it through the morning run. Barely. By mid-morning, I was showered, in uniform, and back in the motor pool, wrenching on equipment and trying to suppress my gag reflex every time the sun hit just right. Final thoughts. We're wired for this madness, aren't we? No matter how stupid, reckless, or utterly nonsensical, we somehow get it done. Hungover, battered, or bruised, the mission gets completed. As I sit here now, sipping on mango habanero whiskey, I wonder if I'll regret it tomorrow. Probably not. My DD 214 exempts me from mandatory morning PT, and I've got the week off. That's a win in my book. Stay sharp, or at least stay entertained, my friends. Life in the motor pool, hungover or not, had its own rhythm. A relentless grind that didn't care if you had 2 hours of sleep or spent the last 3 days pickling your liver. My platoon sergeant, a cyber-enhanced relic named Staff Sergeant Krieger, was a no-nonsense operator. He had seen every excuse, every sob story, and every attempt to dodge work. That day, he didn't even bother yelling. Just a cold, mechanical stare that said, "Get it done, or I'll replace you with someone who will." So I got it done. Bolts tightened. Fuel cells calibrated. My head pounding like a faulty servo the whole time. The truth was, this wasn't just another hangover day. It was the start of a chain reaction. One of those moments you don't recognize as pivotal until the dust settles, and you're standing in the aftermath wondering how you got there. The DMZ. Nightlife and ghosts. The DMZ had a strange vibe. By day, it was all about tension, patrols, drills, and a constant sense of don't screw up or someone might die. But at night, it was like a pressure valve releasing. The bars outside the gate weren't just places to drink. They were sanctuaries. Neon signs flickered like cybernetic eyes, and the air buzzed with a mix of old-school pop songs and the hum of holographic advertisements. After Andy left, I found myself frequenting a dive called the Blue Circuit. It wasn't fancy, but the bartender, Sam, had a knack for pouring shots that tasted like battery acid, yet somehow went down smooth. The regulars were a mix of soldiers, expats, and locals trying to make a buck. One night, I was nursing a synth beer when a guy I'd never seen before slid onto the stool next to me. He had that look, too clean, too polished. Definitely not a grunt. "Mind if I join?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes scanning the room like he was running a tactical analysis. "Free country," I muttered, taking another sip. "Johnny says you're good with problems," he said, dropping the name of my squad's unofficial fixer. I turned to look at him. Depends on the problem. And the payment. He grinned, and I caught a glint of chrome beneath his sleeve. Cyber augments. High-end stuff. Not standard issue for a soldier. I need someone who can keep their mouth shut and their hands steady, he said. Now, I've made some questionable choices in my life, but even drunk me knew this was shady as hell. Still, curiosity got the better of me. What's the job?
The job.
The guy introduced himself as Carter. No rank, no unit, just Carter. He claimed he was running a side gig, recovering tech that had fallen off the truck during transport. A bunch of high-value components, apparently left behind in a storage yard just over the border. Sounds more like stealing than recovering, I said. Call it what you want, Carter replied, sliding a chip across the bar. Here's half up front. More when the job's done. I stared at the chip, the payout glowing in a tidy digital display. It was more than I'd make in 6 months. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Crossing the line. The operation was simple enough on paper. Carter provided the route, the access codes, and the exact location of the crates. My job was to get in, grab the goods, and get out without attracting attention. The DMZ was a wasteland at night. Razor wire and sensor drones stretched as far as the eye could see, and the silence was suffocating. My heart pounded as I approached the storage yard, a patch of no man's land lit by flickering floodlights. Everything went smoothly at first. The access codes worked, the crates were exactly where Carter said they'd be, and my neural implants made quick work of bypassing the locks. But just as I was loading the last crate onto the cart, I heard it, a low hum, followed by the distinct clank of boots on metal. Guards. The chase. I ducked behind a stack of crates, my pulse spiking as the guards' voices echoed through the yard. Sector 4's clear, one said. Check it again. Sensors picked up movement, the other replied. I cursed under my breath, gripping the handle of my shot bag. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The guards moved closer, their footsteps growing louder with each step. I needed a distraction. My HUD flickered, offering a few options: a nearby drone, a stack of barrels, and a control panel that looked like it controlled the yard's lighting. I chose the barrels. A quick hack to the release valve, and they toppled with a deafening crash, spilling their contents across the ground. The guards swore, rushing toward the noise. I used the chaos to slip out, dragging the cart behind me. A double cross. By the time I reached the rendezvous point, my nerves were shot. Carter was waiting, leaning casually against a nondescript van. Everything goes smoothly, he asked, his grin as smug as ever. Smooth enough, I replied, dumping the crates at his feet. He inspected them, nodding with satisfaction. Good work. Here's the rest of your payment. But as he handed me the chip, I noticed something, a faint glow on the underside of his wrist. A military-grade tracker. You set me up, I said, my voice low. Carter's grin widened. Relax. It's just insurance. You'll thank me later. Before I could react, a blacked-out vehicle screeched to a stop behind me. Armed men poured out, their weapons trained on me. Sorry, kid, Carter said, stepping back. Nothing personal. Escape. I don't know how I made it out alive. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was adrenaline. Or maybe it was the combat implant I'd been trying to keep under wraps. Either way, I fought my way out, leaving a trail of chaos in my wake. By the time I reached the safety of the neon-lit streets, I was battered, bruised, and more paranoid than ever. Carter was gone, but his betrayal wasn't something I'd forget. Reflection. Back in my pod, I poured myself a drink and stared at the glowing chip on the table. It was enough to set me up for months, maybe even years. But it didn't feel like a win. In this line of work, trust is a luxury. And I'd just been reminded how dangerous it is to forget that. Retribution. The chip sat on my table, mocking me. It was heavy with credits, sure, but also with the weight of betrayal. Carter had played me, used me as a pawn, and almost got me killed. I couldn't let that stand. I lit a cigarette, the synthetic smoke curling through the dim glow of my pod. My neural link hummed faintly as I accessed the local net. Carter's face flickered in my HUD, his smirk frozen in a profile image linked to a dozen shell companies and untraceable accounts. But nobody is untraceable. Not in my world. It took an hour to find the weak link, a club in the Neon district called Eclipse. It was flashy, packed with mercs, hackers, and wannabe corpos. More importantly, it was where Carter had been spotted last. The Neon district. The air in the Neon district was thick with static and the acrid tang of ozone. Holographic signs danced along the skyline, advertising everything from neural upgrades to off-world getaways. The streets were alive with the hum of hover cars and the chatter of augmented pedestrians. Eclipse was a beacon of chaos, a sprawling, multi-level club with thumping bass lines that rattled your teeth. I pushed through the crowd, my eyes scanning for Carter. My HUD pinged almost instantly. He was there, seated in a private booth surrounded by a mix of muscle and arm candy. He looked relaxed, sipping something expensive and laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. I clenched my fists. My cybernetic arm twitched, eager to introduce him to the business end of its reinforced knuckles. But I needed a plan. Charging in would only get me shot. Or worse, playing the long game. I slid up to the bar, ordered a synth whiskey, and let the music wash over me. My neural link tapped into the club's security system, feeding me a stream of data, guard positions, exit routes, and the layout of the VIP section. There was a flaw, a blind spot near the maintenance corridor. If I could lure Carter out, I'd have a chance to corner him without his goons. I sent a message to his table, using a burner ID. Sender, unknown. Message, we need to talk. Alone. Maintenance corridor. 5 minutes. I watched as Carter checked his comms. His brow furrowed, and for a moment, I thought he'd ignore it. But then he stood, muttering something to his entourage before heading toward the corridor. The confrontation. The corridor was dimly lit, the air thick with the hum of industrial fans. I waited in the shadows, my pulse steady. When Carter appeared, I stepped out, blocking his path. Axel, he said, feigning surprise. Didn't expect to see you here. Cut the crap, I growled. You set me up. He shrugged, his smirk unwavering. You got paid, didn't you? Call it a win-win. You call nearly getting me killed a win? I stepped closer, my cybernetic arm whirring faintly. You're going to tell me who you're working for, and if you lie, I'll know. Carter's grin faltered. You really don't want to do this. Wrong, I said, activating the shock baton hidden in my sleeve. I've been dying to do this. The fight. Carter was fast, faster than I expected. His cybernetic reflexes kicked in, and he dodged my first swing, countering with a blade that extended from his forearm. The corridor erupted into chaos. Sparks flew as his blade clashed with my baton. He was good, but I'd spent years honing my skills in the trenches. I feinted left, then drove my knee into his ribs, sending him crashing into a stack of crates. Talk, I demanded, pinning him against the wall. All right, he gasped. It wasn't personal, just business. Who hired you? He hesitated, his eyes darting toward the door. Big mistake. I drove the baton into his side, sending a jolt of electricity through his body. Okay, it was Kepler Dynamics, he shouted, uncovering the truth. Kepler Dynamics. The name sent a chill down my spine. They were a corporate juggernaut, ruthless, untouchable, and infamous for their black ops. If they were involved, this was bigger than a few stolen crates. Why me? I asked. They needed a fall guy, Carter admitted, slumping against the wall. Someone expendable. You fit the profile. I stared at him, my mind racing. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. Kepler was playing a game, and I'd just become a pawn in their latest move. You're going to help me take them down, I said. Carter laughed weakly. You're crazy. They'll kill us both. Maybe, I said, dragging him to his feet. But I'd rather go down fighting than be their puppet. Planning the heist. Over the next few days, Carter and I worked out a plan. If Kepler wanted to use me, I'd turn the tables. Their main hub was a fortress of steel and glass, guarded by drones, turrets, and an army of mercenaries. But every fortress has a weakness. We hit their data vault, Carter explained, pulling up a holographic blueprint. If we can get in and expose their operation, they'll have bigger problems than us.
It's a suicide mission, I said.
Probably, he agreed. But what choice do we have? The infiltration. The night of the heist. We geared up in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. My armor was patched but functional, and my weapons hummed with energy. Carter handed me a device, a sleek, silver disc about the size of a coin. What's this? I asked. A backdoor into their system, he said. Just get it into the vault. I'll handle the rest. We approached the hub under the cover of darkness, slipping past patrols and security drones. The tension was palpable, every step a gamble. When we reached the vault, the room was eerily quiet, bathed in a cold blue light. I placed the device on the main terminal, and Carter's voice crackled in my comm. All right, we're in, he said. Just hold them off while I extract the data. The betrayal. The first wave hit hard, mercs and exocets, armed to the teeth. I fought like a man possessed, my cybernetic enhancements pushing me to the limit. But as the last enemy fell, I realized something was wrong. The device was gone. Carter, I growled, switching to his channel. What the hell is going on? Sorry, Axel, he said, his voice dripping with mock regret. You're good, but you're still just a pawn. Before I could respond, the vault doors slammed shut, and the lights went red. Alarms blared as the room filled with armed drones. I was trapped. Escape from the vault. The vault was a steel cage, the walls lined with glowing servers and automated defenses. Red lights strobed, and the whir of drones closing was deafening. My pulse quickened. Carter had played me again, and now I was locked in the belly of the beast. I ducked as the first drone opened fire, energy bolts searing through the air. My HUD scrambled to find an exit, mapping the room in seconds. There, an air duct near the ceiling. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than becoming target practice. I rolled behind a console, using it as cover while I hacked into the drone network. My neural implant worked overtime, racing against their countermeasures. A split second later, the drones froze midair, their targeting systems offline. Not so tough now, huh? I muttered, smashing the closest drone with my cybernetic arm. The others clattered to the ground, useless. I scaled the wall, using a grappling hook embedded in my arm to reach the duct. Kicking it open, I crawled inside, the confined space amplifying the sounds of my breathing and the distant alarms. A deal in the shadows. The duct led to a maintenance corridor. I dropped down quietly, scanning for guards. My comm buzzed. It was a private channel. Axel, a voice said. It wasn't Carter. This voice was deeper, calmer. If you want to survive, you'll listen carefully. Who is this? I whispered, moving cautiously down the corridor. Someone who doesn't like Kepler dynamics any more than you do. Call me Wraith. I've been watching you. Great, I muttered. Another stalker. What do you want? To get you out alive, Wraith said. You're resourceful, but you're outmatched. I can guide you to an exit, but you'll owe me. I hated being in debt, especially to someone I didn't trust. But I was out of options.
Female.
What's the play? The gauntlet. Wraith directed me through the labyrinthine facility, avoiding patrols and automated turrets. Along the way, I pieced together what Carter had done. The device wasn't just a backdoor, it was a Trojan horse, designed to siphon data while locking me in. Why does Kepler want me dead so badly? I asked as I dismantled a turret blocking my path. They don't, Wraith replied. They want you framed. When this blows up, they'll pin it on you. A convenient scapegoat. I cursed under my breath. Typical corp play. Almost there, Wraith said. But there's one more obstacle, a security checkpoint. You'll need to disable the power grid to get through. Lights out. The power grid was housed in a heavily guarded control room. I spotted 3 guards through the reinforced glass, their augments gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Subtlety or chaos? I asked. Your call, Wraith said. I chose chaos. Using Using a smoke grenade for cover, I burst into the room, my shock baton crackling with energy. The first guard went down before he could draw his weapon. The second managed to fire off a shot, but my armor absorbed the impact, and a well-placed kick sent him sprawling. The third guard, a hulking brute with a reinforced exoskeleton, proved more challenging. He lunged at me, his mechanical arm swinging like a wrecking ball. I dodged, barely, and countered with a high-voltage strike to his chest. Sparks flew, and he collapsed in a smoking heap. Grids down, I reported, flipping the main switch. The facility plunged into darkness, the alarm silenced. Good, Wraith said. Now run. Out of the frying pan. The exit was just ahead, a service tunnel leading to the city's underbelly. I sprinted, my boots echoing against the concrete. But as I neared the exit, a figure stepped into my path. Carter. You just don't quit, do you? He said, his blade arm glinting in the dim light. I'm not the quitting type, I replied, drawing my plasma pistol. Carter laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You're in over your head, Axel. You think you can take on Kepler? You're nothing but a washed-up merc. Maybe, I said, leveling the pistol. But I'm a pissed-off, washed-up merc. The fight was brutal. Carter was faster, his augments giving him an edge. But I fought dirty, exploiting every weakness. A well-timed EMP burst disabled his blade, and a follow-up punch shattered his visor. You lose, I said, pressing the pistol to his temple. Do it, he spat. I hesitated. Killing him would be easy, satisfying, even, but it wouldn't get me what I needed. Not yet, I said, lowering the weapon. You're going to help me take Kepler down, whether you like it or not. The Alliance. Carter was cuffed and dragged into the tunnels, where Wraith waited. Interesting choice, Wraith said, his face obscured by a digital mask. You think you can trust him? No, I admitted, but I don't need to trust him. I just need him alive long enough to dismantle Kepler. Wraith chuckled. Fair enough. Welcome to the Resistance, Axel. Things are about to get messy. The road ahead. As we made our way through the tunnels, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something far bigger than I'd imagined. Kepler wasn't just another corp. They were playing a game that spanned continents, maybe even worlds. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back. And I wasn't alone.